Number 6 on this list sold gasoline under a name that vanished from every sign in America almost overnight, the day a corporation decided a 50-year-old brand wasn't worth keeping. Number 14 was swallowed by a company so large that its gas stations became nothing more than a rounding error on a balance sheet. Nobody in the boardroom even bothered to read. And number 23 survived 3 different owners over 4 decades without ever losing its own name, until the 4th owner finally let it go for good. 25 stops, every one of them gone. If you had a father or grandfather who drove long haul before 1970, you fueled up at almost every single one of these. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next video, because we're just getting started on bringing back the America that got paved over. Number 1. Stuckey's. Founded 1937. Stuckey started it with a roadside pecan stand on Highway 23 in Eastman, Georgia, built on a $35 loan from his own grandmother. What most people don't know is that Stuckey's ran its own trucking company just to keep its 350-plus stores stocked. That's how big the operation got, big enough to need its own fleet before most Americans had ever seen an interstate on-ramp. Truckers weren't just customers here. Some of them worked for Stuckey's directly. Teal blue roofs against a flat horizon. The smell of warm pecan log rolls through a screen door. Cold cherry cider in a paper cup. Your grandmother buying a bag of pralines she swore was just for the road. Pet Milk bought the company in 1964. A hostile takeover gutted it by 1977. The real reason it died: a corporation that wanted to look good on Wall Street let the roadside stop go to hell to protect the bottom line. The next stop wasn't candy and pecans. It was honey, home cooking, and a man who broke away from Stuckey's because he refused to play by their rules. Number 2. Nickerson Farms. Founded in the mid-1960s. Nickerson had been a Stuckey's franchisee who got tired of following someone else's playbook, so he built his own. What most people don't know is that Nickerson Farms kept actual beehives on site at many locations, selling honey-harvested feed from the parking lot. At its peak, the chain ran roughly 60 full-service restaurants along the new interstates, mostly through the Midwest, each one paired with a gift shop and a fuel island. Sunlight through a gift shop window stacked with jarred honey, vinyl booths, a trucker's logbook open next to a cup of black coffee. Your father pulling in specifically because Nickerson Farms had a real dining room, not just a counter. The chain quietly disappeared by the early 1980s as fuel prices spiked and the interstate system it depended on kept rerouting traffic elsewhere. The real reason it died: a business built entirely around the open road couldn't survive once the road stopped needing a reason to stop. The next name on this list wasn't a restaurant at all. It was a family that built gas stations out of their own lumber mill, one board at a time. Number 3. Whiting Brothers. Founded 1926 in St. John's, Arizona. The Whiting family used lumber straight from their own sawmill to throw up gas stations fast and cheap, the same year Route 66 was officially commissioned. What most people don't know is that Whiting Brothers refused to sell on credit and instead ran their own discount card and trading stamp system, undercutting the big oil companies by a few cents a gallon. At their peak, they ran over 100 stations, 15 motels, and a string of truck stops stretching from Texas to California. Red on yellow signs rising out of desert heat shimmer. Free ice on a summer fill-up. A hand-painted motel sign with half its bulbs burned out. Your father pulling off just for the free ice and staying for the coffee. Fuel shortages and the new interstate bypasses gutted the chain through the 1970s and 80s. The real reason it died: the very highway that made Whiting Brothers possible eventually stopped running past their front door. The next chain didn't sell gasoline out of wood shacks. It sold it under a bold red emblem and a name that got erased from every station in the country in a single year. Number 4. Flying A. Founded in the early 1900s as Tidewater Oil, rebranded with its winged letter A logo mid-century. The company built its identity on speed and reliability, sponsoring race cars and stamping that red flying letter on stations coast to coast. What most people don't know is that flying stations were engineered around a specific promise: attendants trained to check oil, water, and tires without being asked, every single fill-up, no exceptions. That level of full service was standard, not an upcharge. A uniformed attendant jogging out before the car even stopped rolling. The squeak of a windshield being wiped clean. Red pumps glowing at dusk. Your mother rolling down the window just to say, "Fill it up, please," and nothing else. Getty Oil absorbed Tidewater's marketing operations around 1970, and the Flying A name came off the signs for good. The real reason it died: a corporate buyout that saw a beloved regional brand as nothing more than real estate and pump inventory. The next one on this list wasn't a company that got bought out. It was a name that simply stopped existing overnight, by government order. Number 5. Enco, founded 1960 as a rebrand of Humble Oil's regional gasoline brand. Standard Oil of New Jersey needed a name it could use in states where the Esso trademark was legally blocked. What most people don't know is that Enco and Esso were, for over a decade, literally the same company selling the same gasoline under two different names, purely because of a 1911 antitrust breakup that split Standard Oil into competing regional heirs, who all still owned pieces of the original name. A humming red, white, and blue oval sign at the edge of a two-lane highway. The particular smell of an Enco station bathroom, always cleaner than the diner next door. Your grandfather insisting Enco Premium ran smoother in his rig, no matter what anyone said. In 1972, the entire company rebranded to Exxon nationwide, erasing Enco and Esso from American signage in one coordinated campaign. The real reason it died: a corporation decided one global name was worth more than 50 years of local trust. The next brand faced almost the identical fate: different company, same quiet erasure. Number 6. Esso. Founded in the early 1900s, the name itself just the phonetic spelling of Esso Standard Oil. For decades, it was one of the most recognized gasoline names east of the Mississippi. What most people don't know is that Esso couldn't legally be sold under its own name in several states, which is the entire reason Enco existed as a parallel brand. One company running two identities, just to get around old antitrust rulings from the trust-busting era. The click of a gas cap in cold morning air. A red oval sign glowing against a rainy windshield. A catchy jingle drifting out of a dashboard radio. Your father humming along without even noticing. Esso officially became Exxon in the United States in 1973, though the name lives on internationally to this day. The real reason it died in America: one unified global brand was cheaper to market than 50 years of regional loyalty. The next stop on this list wasn't gasoline at all in most people's memory. It was a name that quietly turned into a Citgo sign almost nobody noticed changing. Number 7. City Service. Founded 1910 by Henry Doherty as a utility holding company that expanded hard into oil and gas retail by the 1920s. Its green and white shield became a fixture on American highways for over half a century. What most people do not know is that City Service quietly retired its own name in 1965, adopting Citgo as a shortened marketing brand years before most customers noticed the change had even happened. A weathered green sign fading in afternoon glare. The rattle of an old air hose next to the pump. Your grandmother trusting City Service specifically because the attendant always checked her tire pressure without being asked. The City Service name disappeared from stations through the late 1960s and 70s as Citgo branding fully took over. The real reason it died: a marketing department decided a shorter, punchier name would sell better than 70 years of a driver's trust. Number 8. Richfield Oil. Founded 1905 in California, known for its striking red, white, and blue eagle logo, and for sponsoring some of the earliest coast-to-coast automobile road maps ever printed. Up next is a chain that didn't get renamed so much as it got swallowed whole by a much bigger company. What most people don't know is that Richfield's parent company essentially invented the modern gas station roadmap as a marketing tool, handing them out for free decades before anyone thought of driving directions as a business. A weathered roadside sign catching sunset light on a two-lane road. Free paper maps stacked by the register, corners already curling from the heat. Your father unfolding one across the dashboard, tracing tomorrow's route with his thumb. Richfield merged with Atlantic Refining in 1966 to form APCO, and the standalone Richfield name gradually vanished from stations. The real reason it died: two competing oil giants decided a merger was worth more than either brand's individual history. Number 9. Sunray DX. The next one on this list didn't disappear through a merger. It disappeared because the whole company got sold off in pieces. Founded through a 1958 merger of Sunray Oil and the DX brand, known for its diamond-shaped logo and a reputation among truckers for consistently clean restrooms, a rarer thing than it should have been. What most people don't know is that the founders of DX originally built the brand around Diamond Extra Gasoline, a premium fuel marketed specifically as tougher on long-haul engines than standard blends. A red sign glowing against a gravel lot at dusk. The hiss of an air hose filling a semi's tires. Your grandfather swearing DX kept his engine quieter on long grades, and nobody arguing with him. Sun Oil Company absorbed Sunray DX by 1968, folding the brand into what would eventually become Sunoco. The real reason it died: a smaller regional player couldn't outmarket a national giant once fuel competition tightened. The next stop wasn't swallowed by a merger either. It just quietly stopped being profitable enough to keep the lights on. Number 10. Pure Oil. Founded 1895 in Ohio, instantly recognizable by its cottage-style stations with blue tile roofs, designed to look less like an industrial site and more like a tidy little house. What most people don't know is that Pure Oil deliberately built its stations to look domestic and non-threatening, specifically to reassure the growing number of women driving alone in the 1920s and 30s, a genuinely progressive marketing decision for its era. A small blue-roofed station glowing warm against dusk, more like a cottage than a garage. A hand-lettered sign swinging gently on a chain. Your mother saying she always felt safer stopping at the little blue house stations after dark. Union Oil acquired Pure in 1965, and the cottage-style stations were slowly phased out over the following decade. The real reason it died: a design built for trust in the 1920s couldn't compete with the discount pricing of the 1960s. The next chain on this list is still technically alive today, but the version truckers actually relied on has been gone for 50 years. Number 11. Sinclair Oil. Founded 1916, famous for its green brontosaurus mascot, Dino, used to market its gasoline as refined from only the oldest, purest crude. What most people don't know is that the Dino mascot began as a legitimate paleontology marketing tie-in. Sinclair funded real dinosaur exhibits at the 1933 World's Fair, genuinely trying to teach customers where oil supposedly came from. A giant roadside statue looming over a gravel lot at dusk. Kids pressing their faces to the car window to stare at it. Your father pulling in specifically so you'd stop asking to see it. Most of Sinclair's classic roadside stations and giant dino statues were torn down or sold off as the company scaled back through the 1970s. The real reason it died: a beloved piece of roadside theater couldn't survive once gas stations became self-service boxes. Before we continue, tell me in the comments which one of these first 12 you actually remember riding past as a kid. The giant roadside statue at the old Sinclair stations, the Pure Oil cottage roofs, or your dad timing a whole trip around the glow of a Union 76 sign. I read every single one. The next stop wasn't trying to be memorable at all. It was built purely to be the cheapest gallon on the highway. Number 12. Kayo. Founded in the 1930s as Sinclair's budget sub-brand, sold at stations that skipped the theatrics and just competed hard on price. What most people don't know is that Kayo stations deliberately avoided full-service attendance specifically to undercut every major brand around them by several cents a gallon, an early, aggressive version of the self-serve discount model. A plain yellow and black sign with no mascot, no gimmick. The clank of a pump handle with worn-out numbers. Your grandfather choosing Kayo purely because the load he was hauling didn't pay enough to afford anything fancier. Kayo quietly disappeared as Sinclair consolidated its brands through the 1970s. The real reason it died: A no-frills discount brand only works until a bigger company decides discounting isn't worth running two names for. Next on the list is a company most people have never even heard of, but every trucker on a Kansas highway in the 1950s absolutely had. Number 13. Deep Rock. Founded 1917 in Oklahoma, built its reputation on drilling deeper wells than competitors dared, marketing that depth as proof of purity. What most people don't know is that Deep Rock's name wasn't a slogan. The company genuinely marketed the specific geological depth of its wells as a selling point, printing exact figures on some regional advertising. A weathered sign creaking on rusted chains. The smell of hot asphalt and diesel mixing on a summer afternoon. Your father trusting Deep Rock because his own father had, and that was reason enough. The company was absorbed into larger regional players through a series of quiet buyouts by the 1960s and 70s. The real reason it died, an independent regional brand with no national marketing budget, simply got outspent into irrelevance. The next chain on this list didn't get bought out for its gasoline. It got bought out for its name and its bold red sign. Number 14. Signal Oil. Founded 1922 in California, known for its bold red diamond-shaped sign that truckers could spot from a mile down a flat highway. What most people don't know is that Signal's parent company eventually became one of the largest industrial conglomerates in America, holding stakes in everything from aerospace to insurance. The gas stations became a rounding error in a company that had grown far beyond fuel. A red sign glowing over an empty desert two-lane. The particular quiet of a station with no other cars in sight for miles. Your grandfather timing his whole route around exactly where the next Signal station would be. Signal's fuel retail operations were sold off piece by piece through the 1970s as the parent conglomerate shifted focus entirely away from gasoline. The real reason it died. The company that owned it simply decided gas stations weren't the business it wanted to be in anymore. The next stop wasn't abandoned by a distracted parent company. It just never had the scale to survive what was coming. Number 15. Derby. Founded in the 1920s, a Kansas-based refining and regional retail operation. A genuinely small operation that punched well above its size across the Great Plains. What most people don't know is that Derby stayed independently owned far longer than most of its competitors, refusing multiple buyout offers through the 1950s purely because the founding family wanted to keep it local. A modest sign at a two-pump station in the middle of open plains. The particular silence of a Kansas highway at dusk. Your father choosing Derby because, at least he'd say, it's still somebody's family business. Derby was eventually acquired and folded into a larger petroleum company by the late 1960s, ending its run as an independent. The real reason it died? Loyalty to staying small and local can only outlast a buyout offer for so long. The next name on this list wasn't a gas brand at all. It was the truck stop where the gas brand barely mattered. Number 16. Skelly Oil. Founded 1919 in Oklahoma by William Skelly, growing into one of the dominant regional brands across the central United States by mid-century. What most people don't know is that Skelly Gasoline was the exclusive fuel sold at many Nickerson Farms locations, meaning two beloved roadside names from this very list were, for years, literally the same fill-up. A weathered orange and black Skelly sign against a gray Midwest sky. The smell of fresh coffee drifting from an attached diner counter. Your grandfather calling it Skelly's the way you'd say a friend's name. Getty Oil acquired Skelly in 1977, and the name was phased out of the market within a few years. The real reason it died, an independent regional identity rarely survives its first major corporate acquisition intact. Next up is a chain most drivers only ever knew by its full-service promise, not its name. Number 17. Champlin Petroleum. Founded 1916 in Oklahoma, built a loyal Great Plains and Rocky Mountain following on a reputation for unusually consistent fuel quality control. What most people don't know is that Champlin ran one of the most rigorous in-house fuel testing programs of any mid-sized regional brand. A detailed truckers hauling temperature-sensitive freight specifically valued and sought out. a blue and white sign catching the last light on a mountain pass. The low rumble of a diesel engine idling in cold air. Your father specifically detouring to a Champlin station before a long grade, just to be safe. Champlin passed through several corporate owners, including Union Pacific, before its retail identity was dissolved by the 1980s. The real reason it died: a brand built on quiet reliability rarely survives being traded between owners who don't understand what made it trusted. The next stop was less about the gasoline and entirely about who was standing behind the counter. Number 18. APCO. Founded in the 1930s in Oklahoma, a genuinely small regional chain that built its loyalty almost entirely on word of mouth between independent truckers. What most people don't know is that APCO stations were disproportionately owner-operated rather than corporate-run, meaning the same face was often behind the counter for 20 straight years, a rarity even then. A hand-painted APCO sign, slightly crooked, bolted to a wooden post. The creak of a screen door that never quite closed all the way. Your grandfather greeted by name before he'd even shut off the engine. Total Petroleum acquired APCO in the 1970s, and the regional identity was absorbed within a few years. The real reason it died: the personal small-town version of a gas station couldn't survive corporate consolidation, no matter how loyal its customers were. The next name on this list wasn't a gas brand at all. It was a dedicated truck stop chain built by an oil giant specifically for professional drivers. Number 19. Union 76. Founded in the 1930s as Union Oil's flagship brand, expanding into dedicated truck stop facilities by the 1950s and 60s, marked by a glowing orange sign visible for miles. What most people don't know is that Union 76's truck stop division was one of the first to standardize amenities specifically for professional drivers: showers, dedicated parking, and citizens band radio hookups, treating truckers as a distinct customer, not an afterthought. A giant illuminated orange sign glowing against the night sky. Rows of idling trailers lined up like sleeping animals. Your father backing in expertly, without even glancing at his mirrors. Muscle memory from 100 nights just like it. Union Oil scaled back its dedicated truck stop network through the 1980s as larger chains like Truck Stops of America consolidated the industry. The real reason it died: a company that pioneered the modern truck stop got outbuilt by competitors willing to go bigger, faster. Next on the list isn't a gas station at all. It's the orange roof every family on a road trip used to recognize before they even read the sign. Number 20. Howard Johnson's. Founded 1925 in Massachusetts, expanding along America's highways with its unmistakable orange roof and 28 flavors of ice cream, becoming one of the largest restaurant chains in the country by the 1960s. What most people don't know is that at its 1970s peak, Howard Johnson's operated more restaurants than McDonald's, Burger King, and Kentucky Fried Chicken combined. A fact almost nobody remembers about a brand people now barely recognize at all. An orange roof glowing against a summer sky. The specific clink of a fountain glass and a scoop of peppermint stick ice cream. Your mother always ordering the fried clams every single time without opening the menu. The chain collapsed through a series of ownership changes in the 1980s and 90s, closing its last full-service restaurant in 2022. The real reason it died: a brand built for the slower rhythm of pre-interstate travel never adapted to a country in a hurry. The next stop on this list didn't fade slowly. It collapsed almost overnight, over a single word in its own name. Number 21. Sambo's Restaurants. Founded 1957 in California by Sam Battistone and Newell Bonnet, growing to over 1,100 locations nationwide by the late 1970s and a genuine trucker favorite for cheap, fast breakfast. What most people don't know is that at its peak, Sambo's was larger than many national chains still operating today, and its collapse had almost nothing to do with food quality or service at all. Laminate tables under fluorescent light at 3 in the morning. The smell of hash browns on a flat-top grill. Your grandfather timing an entire overnight route around which exit had a Sambo's still open. Nationwide controversy over the restaurant's name forced a wave of closures through the early 1980s, and the company filed for bankruptcy in 1981. The real reason it died: a name chosen in 1957 without a thought for how the country would change around it. The next name on this list belonged to a family, not a corporation, and that made all the difference in how it ended. Number 22. Horne's Restaurants and Motor Lodges. Founded in the middle of the 20th century in New England, becoming a fixture along the main turnpike and coastal Route 1, known for lobster rolls and genuinely clean, family-run motor lodges. What most people don't know is that Horne's was, for years, one of the only reliable overnight stops for truckers running the entire New England coast, filling a gap that no national chain had bothered to serve. Salt air through a propped restaurant door, the specific squeak of a screen door at a roadside motel office. Your father pulling in purely because Horne's felt like the last honest stop before a long stretch of nothing. The family-run chain closed its remaining locations through the 1980s and 90s as regional traffic patterns shifted away from the old coastal routes. The real reason it died: a beloved local institution has no defense against a highway simply being rerouted around it. The next stop belonged to no single family. It was a fuel brand that got sold under a dozen different names in a dozen different states. Number 23. Vickers Gasoline. Founded 1937 in Kansas, expanding through the Midwest and Great Plains with a loyal base of independent truckers who valued its consistency more than its size. What most people don't know is that Vickers was passed between at least 3 different parent companies over 4 decades, yet somehow kept its original name and branding recognizable to drivers the entire time, a rare thing in an industry built on constant buyouts. A weathered green and white sign at a 2-pump crossroads station, the hollow ring of a bell hose triggering as tires roll over it. Your father recognizing the sign before he could even read the letters, purely from memory. Getty Oil eventually folded Vickers into its broader operations by the late 1970s, retiring the name for good. The real reason it died: even a brand that survived 3 ownership changes eventually runs out of new owners willing to keep it alive. The next chain on this list wasn't gasoline or food at all. It was the parking lot itself that mattered most. Number 24. Giant Truck Stops. Founded in the 1960s across the Midwest, built specifically around one thing competitors underestimated: guaranteed, reliable overnight parking for tractor trailers. What most people don't know is that in the years before dedicated truck stops became standard, finding safe, legal overnight parking was one of the single biggest daily problems facing long-haul drivers. Giant built its entire business around solving exactly that. Gravel crunching under dual tires as a rig eases into a spot. The low hum of 100 idling engines settling in for the night. Your grandfather calling ahead on the radio just to confirm there was still room. Larger consolidated chains bought out most regional truck stop operators, including Giant, through the late 1970s and 80s. The real reason it died: solving a real problem well isn't enough once a bigger company can solve the same problem at 20 times the scale. And the last stop on this list wasn't the biggest name or the flashiest sign. It was simply the one nobody ever forgot. Number 25. White Fence Farm Truck Stop Diners. Founded in the middle of the 20th century as a regional chain of family-style diners attached to fueling stops, known for genuinely home-cooked meals served at truck stop speed. What most people don't know is that many of these diners were run by the same families for decades, meaning a trucker driving the same route for 20 years could watch a waitress's own children grow up behind that same counter. Fried chicken steam fogging a diner window, a jukebox playing something slow in the corner, your father calling the waitress by her first name, because after enough years, she genuinely was almost family. Most locations closed through the 1980s and the 1990s as chain restaurants and interstate rest stops replaced the old 2-lane diner model entirely. The real reason it died: the interstate gave drivers speed, but it took away every single place that actually knew them. These stops didn't stop working. They didn't fade out on their own. They were bought, renamed and paved over by companies that never understood what they were actually selling. Not gasoline, but the feeling of being known somewhere on an empty highway. Which one of these was part of your family's road? Not the station itself, the moment around it, the voice that greeted you, the smell through the car window before you even parked. Tell me in the comments. Subscribe, because there is a lot more of this country left to remember.